During an exclusive interview with ex-husband Jackson Carter, the host posed a question to him. "Mr. Carter, being so successful, you must not have done anything wrong, right?" He lifted his gaze and looked directly into the camera before him, as if trying to see someone through that lens. "The only wrong thing I've ever done in this life was loving the wrong person, one who then bore me, an ungrateful little wretch. But it's okay, heaven sent my current wife Vivian to me, whom I love dearly, and I also deeply love the baby she's carrying in her womb." On the night the interview concluded, Jackson was having dinner with Vivian when a news report suddenly aired on the television. Police recently discovered 2 bodies in Dongshan. Preliminary forensic examinations indicate one victim was approximately 25 to 30 years old, while the other was under 5 years of age. The victims appear to have endured inhuman abuse before death. Authorities are deploying all resources to solve this heinous crime. Vivian's hand holding the fork paused, her face turning deathly pale. Jackson thought she was frightened by the news and asked Mrs. Davis to turn off the TV, abruptly silencing the broadcast. Standing before them with my daughter's hand in mine, a cold smile played at the corners of my lips, but my daughter merely stared blankly at the now dark television screen before finally turning to look at me. "Mom, why are we on TV?" 01. Vivian's lips trembled as fine beads of sweat emerged across her forehead. Jackson frowned slightly, his handsome features creased with concern as he looked at Vivian. "What's wrong, Viv? Are you feeling unwell? Is the baby acting up again?" Vivian took a deep breath, set down her fork, and forced a faint smile. "And no, nothing, just startled by that news earlier." Jackson finally relaxed, gently covering Vivian's hand to comfort her. "Don't worry, I've already asked Mrs. Davis to turn off the TV. We won't watch such distressing news anymore. You're carrying our child, and we don't want you getting frightened unnecessarily. My Vivi, you're still as kind as ever." "Kindness?" I stared fixedly at Vivian's deathly pale face, finding it utterly laughable. Jackson was my ex-husband. Back in college, he fell in love with me at first sight, and we naturally became a couple. Shortly after graduation, we got married, and Vivian was my best friend at the orphanage when I was a child. After Vivian graduated from college and couldn't find a job, I introduced her to Jackson's company. Little did I know this decision would ultimately lead to the deaths of both me and my daughter. The year my daughter turned 3, she was kidnapped. The kidnappers called our home, but that day, Jackson was working late and couldn't be reached by phone. I had no choice but to take the money and go alone to the location specified by the kidnappers. When I arrived at that abandoned warehouse on East Mountain, my daughter's small body was covered in wounds. The moment she saw me, she cried out in pain, screaming "Mommy," through her tears. My heart shattered at that moment. I rushed forward and clung to my daughter, kowtowing repeatedly to the kidnappers and begging for forgiveness. "Please, I beg you. I didn't call the police. I brought the money as you asked. Please don't hurt my daughter. I'm begging you." But that day, the kidnappers weren't after money, they wanted our lives. All 10 of my fingernails were ripped out. Bottle after bottle of corrosive liquid was poured over me. The last one, they forced down my throat. My daughter kept crying and begging for mercy beside me, her voice so hoarse it was heartbreaking. Yet the burning in my throat left me unable to utter a single sound. By the end, there wasn't a single patch of unbroken skin left on my body from the torture. When I was on the verge of death, Vivian walked up to me, arms crossed, her eyes filled with disgust. "Blame your own luck for being too good. What makes you better than me? Why do you get to marry Mr. Carter, while I'm stuck as a junior assistant at Carter Enterprises? Even if I seduced Jackson, so what? You know what he said? He'd never marry me." "Huh, how pathetic. Chloe, aren't we best friends? Since you've been living the high life for so long, it's about time you made way for me. Alright, bury it up in the mountains. Be careful, don't let anyone find out." After discovering that my daughter and I had gone missing, Jackson searched frantically for any trace of us. But Vivian fabricated a pile of photos, fake chat logs with me, and even doctored company financial records showing large withdrawals. Vivian told Jackson that I had long been in love with someone else, and had only married him for the Carter family's money. This time, I didn't disappear. I ran off with another man after embezzling company funds, taking our daughter with me. Vivian was my only friend, the one I confided in about everything, so Jackson easily believed her words and called off all searches for me and our daughter. During that time, Jackson fell into despair, while Vivian became his most understanding confidant, supporting him through those darkest days. They fell in love naturally and got married, and now, Vivian is pregnant. Meanwhile, my daughter's body and mine were finally discovered. 02. Vivian pushed away the bowl in front of her and looked at Jackson. "Jack, I can't eat anymore. I'm a bit tired today and want to rest early." Jackson didn't suspect anything and led Vivian into the bedroom. "Let's turn in early today. It's perfect timing since I don't have much work at the company tomorrow. I'll have plenty of time to keep you company. My daughter and I found our incorporeal forms drifting helplessly toward the bedroom after them. Ever since our deaths, my daughter and I had been forcibly bound to Jackson's side. Though I'd tried every possible means to escape this tether, all attempts proved futile, leaving me no choice but to endure day after day of witnessing Jackson and Vivian's saccharine displays of affection. Vivian was already 6 months pregnant, and when lying in bed, there was a noticeable curve to her lower abdomen. Jackson carefully pressed his ear against Vivian's belly. "Be a good baby. I'm your daddy. Mommy isn't feeling well today, so be nice and don't be naughty." Watching this touching scene before me, I could feel my eyes growing moist. I thought people wouldn't feel heartache after death, but in these 3 years since passing, every time I witnessed such scenes, my heart still ached so badly I could barely breathe. My daughter tugged at my little hand, her sweet voice trembling with sobs. "Mommy, is Daddy going to have another child?" "Daddy's a liar. He promised. He said Bella would be his only child. He lied to me." I crouched down and held my daughter tightly in my arms. I wanted so badly to say something to comfort her, but not a single word came out. After all, I couldn't even comfort myself. How could I comfort my 3-year-old daughter? It wasn't until noon the next day that Vivian finally awoke, drowsy and sluggish. Jackson had stayed home from work, keeping her company. When he saw Vivian wake up, his charming peach blossom eyes crinkled with a smile. "Awake? Let me take you out shopping. We still haven't finished setting up the nursery. We should carefully pick out whatever else we need." My daughter and I also found ourselves uncontrollably following them out the door. When we arrived at the mother and baby store in the city's largest shopping mall, Vivian was instantly captivated by all those adorable infant products and began selecting items with great enthusiasm. Jackson stood right beside her, his arm around her waist, offering comments on every item she picked. To any observer, the two appeared to be a match made in heaven. Even the waiter couldn't help but tease with a smile. "You two look truly perfect together, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, a gifted scholar and a beautiful lady. Your future baby will surely be adorable." I lowered my eyes, unwilling to witness the scene before me any longer. But at the very moment I averted my gaze, I noticed my daughter standing dejectedly in the toy section, her eyes filled with longing as she stared at the Barbie doll in front of her. Her tiny, translucent hand reached out again and again, only to pass through the doll each time. Until the very end, I watched as my daughter's hand slowly fell, tears rolling down my cheeks in large drops. At the same time, Jackson's voice rang in my ears. These, and the ones we just looked at, wrap them all up and send them to the Carter residence." Vivian chuckled, her tone playful yet scolding. "Why buy so many toys? Who knows how long it'll be before the baby can even play with them? You're just wasting money." Jackson's tender gaze rested on Vivian's slightly protruding abdomen. "My child deserves the finest things in this world. He might choose not to play with them, but I cannot choose not to buy." Witnessing this scene, I quickly turned to look at my daughter. Sure enough, my daughter had seen it all too. She stared blankly at her father, then slowly turned her gaze toward the busy waitstaff packing items, before finally lowering her head with equal deliberation. I couldn't see my daughter's face, only the faint trembling of her shoulders, which seemed to indicate she was crying even harder. I hurried to my daughter's side, only to hear her murmuring, "Daddy doesn't like Bella anymore. Daddy doesn't like Bella anymore." My daughter repeated this sentence over and over, the brokenness in her voice making my heart feel as if it were being clenched tightly by a large hand, and my hatred for Vivian reached its peak. Thief, Vivian, that thief. She didn't just steal my life, nor merely my husband. She also stole my daughter's life, stole my daughter's father. At that moment, Jackson's phone rang, and his frown deepened even further. "Hello, is this Mr. Jackson Carter? We're from the Eastwood Police Department. We've discovered 2 bodies on East Mountain and have strong reason to believe they may be your ex-wife Miss Chloe Miller and your daughter. Excuse me, do you have a moment now?" 03. Jackson remained silent for a long while, his brows tightly furrowed, as if he couldn't comprehend what was being said on the other end of the call. Vivian looked puzzled. "Jack? What's wrong, Jack?" Jackson finally seemed to snap out of it, speaking coldly into the phone. "Scamming tactics these days are truly sophisticated. How dare they try to fool me? You've got the wrong person. I don't know any Chloe Miller." With those words, Jackson decisively hung up the phone. Perhaps recalling last night's news, Vivian's face suddenly turned rather grim. "Jack, who was on the phone just now? Why did they suddenly mention Chloe?" Jackson locked his phone screen and said casually, "No one important, just a scam call. Don't bother with it." Perhaps even Jackson himself didn't notice that his voice had tightened slightly when he said those words, and even his hand holding the phone trembled faintly. Vivian wanted to say something more, but Jackson cut her off. "Enough, let's not talk about such unpleasant things. Let's go. I booked dinner on the luxury cruise today. We're not going home tonight. I'm taking you out for a proper break." Vivian suppressed her unease, forcing a smile and nodding slightly. After finishing their meal at the cruise ship's top deck restaurant, Jackson led Vivian onto the deck. Leaning against the railing, Vivian stretched her head out to feel the cool night sea breeze. Jack, I feel so happy. When I was in the orphanage as a child, I was often bullied. Back then, I always wished for a prince to rescue me, that I would marry the prince and have a home of my own. I think all my dreams have come true now. I have you, I have the baby in my belly, and I finally have a home. Jackson stood behind her, gently wrapping his arms around her waist. The scene before me burned my eyes. Through my tear-blurred vision, I seemed to see Jackson again, just like when he first confessed his feelings to me. At that time, Jackson was the sole heir of the Carter enterprise, while I was just an orphan with no parents, barely scraping by on student loans for tuition. Yet Jackson persistently pursued me for a solid 6 months. Faced with my repeated rejections, the 18-year-old boy stood before me with a flushed face. Chloe, I know you feel insecure, but could you trust me just once? I'll cherish you properly. I'll give you a home. From now on, you won't be alone anymore. You have me. The stars were brilliantly bright that day, just like tonight's stars, yet the boy's eyes shining with nervousness and unease were even more dazzling, outshining the entire starry sky. I couldn't tell whether it was the starlight in his eyes that intoxicated me, or if his words were simply too irresistible. That day, as if bewitched, I found myself nodding in agreement. Vivian's voice pulled me back to reality. Jack, thank you for giving me a home. Jackson's arm around Vivian's waist suddenly stiffened. Not hearing Jackson's response, Vivian turned around in confusion to look at him. Jackson stared intently at Vivian's face, his thoughts unreadable. After a long pause, Jackson's voice spoke faintly. Vivi, did Chloe really run away with another man? 04. Vivian froze momentarily, with a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes. But in the next second, Vivian's eyes brimmed red, her voice choking with emotion as she spoke up. Jack, what do you mean by that? Are you doubting me? Seeing Vivian cry, Jackson finally seemed to snap out of his daze, flusteredly wiping her tears away. Vivi, don't cry. I didn't mean it that way. I was wrong. I'll never say it again. Don't be upset. You're carrying our baby in your belly. Vivian stamped her foot in feigned anger and turned her back on him. But only I noticed that Vivian's hands were clenched tightly into fists, as if she was desperately trying to conceal the unease in her heart. Seeing Vivian upset, Jackson pulled out his phone as if sending a message to someone. Half an hour later, boom, the night sky above the deck exploded with fireworks, drawing gasps from the tourists below. Jackson held Vivian tightly from behind. Don't be angry, all right? That hymn carried a lingering tone, its softness utterly captivating. The tears I'd held back all night suddenly came pouring down. In the past, whenever I got upset, Jackson would coax me with precisely these words. After 4 years in love and 5 years of marriage, Jackson and I had spent 9 full years together. He knew exactly how to melt my heart. Once, those words were meant only for me. Now, he was whispering them into another woman's ear. Whether it was the fireworks blooming across the sky that cheered Vivian, or Jackson's surrender that pleased her more, her anger dissolved as she turned and buried herself in his embrace. Never mention her again. Vivian's coquettish tone darkened Jackson's gaze. In one swift motion, he swept her into his arms and carried her straight toward the luxury suites of the cruise ship. The moment they entered the room, they surrendered to their cravings without hesitation. I held my daughter tightly in my arms, covering her eyes, unwilling to let her witness the filthy scene before us. Throughout these 3 years, every intimate moment between them unfolded before my eyes. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape. I could only strive to shield my daughter from such sights. Every time he was with Vivian, Jackson became utterly wild. Each instance of his intoxication plunged me deeper into despair. During our 9 years together, even in bed, Jackson had always been gentle and restrained, handling me with such care as though afraid of hurting me. I had never seen Jackson so out of control. At that moment, I finally understood. There's no such thing as innate restraint. Someone could ignite his passion, only that someone was never me. Vivian still clung to the last remnants of reason, but when she spoke, her voice was so seductive it could melt bones. I'm still carrying a child in my belly. Don't get so worked up. Jackson's voice was hoarse with overpowering desire. The doctor said it's fine as long as you're careful. The charged atmosphere grew increasingly thick in the air. I tried squeezing my eyes shut, yet still couldn't block those suggestive sounds from piercing my ears. My daughter's tiny body trembled violently in my arms. Hatred for the scene before me and heartache for the child in my arms pulled at me relentlessly. The pain was so unbearable I wished I could dissolve into nothingness immediately. There truly exist things in this world 100 times more sorrowful than death. Just as the stifling tension in the air was about to reach its peak, violent knocking erupted at the door. His mood shattered, Jackson's voice carried irritation. Piss off. Yet instead of stopping, the knocking only grew more frenzied. Jackson irritably ran his fingers through his hair, abruptly stood up, and rushed to the door, yanking it open. Have you lost your mind? Jackson's voice cut off the moment he saw two police officers standing outside. The officers produced their badges, eyeing Jackson, who had nothing but a towel wrapped around his waist. Mr. Jackson Carter, good afternoon. We're officers from the Eastwood Police Department. The deceased have been identified as your ex-wife Chloe Miller and your daughter. Could you come with us now? 05. On the way to the police station, Jackson struggled to control the trembling of his body, yet cold sweat continued to bead heavily on his forehead. Jackson seemed enveloped in sheer terror, so much so that he didn't even notice Vivian beside him had turned deathly pale, looking as if she might faint at any moment. I sneered at Vivian's overwhelming fear. Scared? Fear is what you should feel. Ever since the day you laid hands on me and my daughter, you should have seen this coming. At the police station, Jackson's legs turned to lead weights as he faced two white-shrouded corpses, one large, one small, unable to take another step forward. The forensic examiner cast a pitying glance at the man before lowering his head to review the case file in subdued tones. Relatives should mentally prepare themselves. Both victims have been deceased for over 3 years. The bodies are extensively decomposed and unrecognizable. Jackson's legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed to his knees, muttering incessantly. 3 years? Impossible, impossible. How could it be Chloe and Bella? They took so much money, they should be living well. How could they be dead? The forensic examiner looked pained. Although the bodies were beyond recognition, DNA tests confirm the deceased are indeed your ex-wife Chloe Miller and your daughter Bella Carter. Jackson's breathing grew heavier, veins bulging at his neck as if straining to suppress his emotions. The officer beside him glanced at Vivian before speaking in a cold voice. Mr. Carter, we contacted you today not just to identify the body, but also to request your cooperation in our investigation. Your ex-wife and child were murdered 3 years ago. Surely you haven't. But before the policeman could finish speaking, Jackson had already scrambled up from the ground and rushed toward my corpse, howling at me in uncontrolled fury. Weren't you in love with someone else? You bitch. Was that man so good that it was worth taking our child and leaving me? Weren't you so capable? How could you die? What? Couldn't the man you so carefully picked protect you? Chloe, get up right now. Get up immediately. Nobody gave you permission to lie here without my say. Jackson extended his hand as he spoke, seeming to want to lift my corpse from the bed. Seeing this, the policeman hurried forward and grabbed Jackson by the arm. Mr. Carter, Miss Miller has passed away. Please accept our condolences and try to stay calm. Jackson slammed a furious fist into the policeman's face, shouting at him as tears fell in heavy drops. You're bullshitting. This isn't Chloe. It's not. What gives you the right to curse her? What sorrow should I restrain? Tell me, what sorrow should I restrain? Everyone present was startled by Jackson's sudden outburst and rushed forward to restrain him, but Jackson suddenly froze in place at that moment. The next second, his legs gave way, and he collapsed to his knees, spewing a torrent of blood from his mouth. Everyone turned pale with shock as Jackson closed his eyes completely, losing consciousness. I watched the chaotic scene before me with cold detachment. Vivian stood alone behind the crowd, her pregnant belly prominent, her face as white as the wall behind her. I noticed Vivian's lips trembling as if she was murmuring something. Moving closer to Vivian, her faint whispers became clearly audible to me. No, it won't be discovered. Those people took my money and ran long ago. There's no way the police could find them. It wasn't me who did it. It's got nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. I sneered inwardly. Scared already? It's too early for that. Vivian was still muttering something when a cop's sharp shout cut off her monologue. Get him to the hospital. Now. Jackson woke up the next day. The first sight Jackson saw upon waking was Vivian sobbing by his bedside. Jackson's eyes were lifeless, as though his very soul had been drained away. Seeing Jackson awake, Vivian rushed to speak through her tears. How could you be so reckless with your own health? If you were gone, what would happen to me and our child? You're all I have left, Jackson. You're all I have. 06. Jackson's gaze finally focused as his eyes slowly turned toward Vivian, who was weeping. Seeing Vivian like this stirred something in Jackson's heart. When Chloe and their daughter first left, Jackson felt as though he'd lost the whole world. There were even moments when he thought he'd lost all hope in life. After all, those were his 9 years. Chloe was his beloved. He truly wanted to spend his life with her. During those days that were nothing but darkness to him, it was Vivian who stayed by his side, Vivian who kept guiding him through. For Vivian, he was grateful. His lips trembled slightly, his gaze once again falling on Vivian's slightly rounded belly before Jackson finally spoke softly. Don't cry anymore. You're still carrying our child. What if you ruin your eyes from crying? Seeing Jackson finally respond to her, Vivian couldn't hold back her sobs any longer. The moment Jackson woke up, he couldn't wait to leave the hospital. Neither his secretary nor Vivian could dissuade him, so they took him home. Once inside, Jackson didn't instruct the secretary to take Vivian back to her room to rest. After watching Vivian enter the bedroom, Jackson surveyed the furnishings in their home, and the tears he'd been holding back throughout the journey finally streamed down uncontrollably. This home was once meticulously arranged by him and Chloe, piece by piece, from the flooring and wall tiles down to the bowls and chopsticks in the kitchen, all carefully chosen by Chloe. Together with Chloe, they had shaped this home into their envisioned paradise. But after marrying Vivian, Vivian personally replaced all the decorations, gradually erasing every trace of Chloe. Staring at this home that felt both foreign and familiar, Jackson could only feel disoriented. Did Chloe, who smiled while holding the vase and asked for his opinion, really fall in love with someone else? Lost in thought, Jackson suddenly seemed to remember something and strode straight toward the third floor of the villa. Pushing open the door to the third-floor storage room, a thick cloud of dust rose instantly upon entry. Its misty swirl in the air perfectly mirrored Jackson's own memories, sealed away for 3 full years. With trembling hands, Jackson opened a wooden crate tucked away in the farthest corner. That box was Chloe's treasure chest, filled with countless yellowed amusement park tickets, movie stubs, bus tickets, and boarding passes. Every time they went on a date or a trip, Chloe would carefully collect all the ticket stubs. Jackson would always laugh at her for hoarding these little scraps, but Chloe would always wrinkle her nose and retort, "What do you know? These are proof of our love. If you ever fall for someone else, I can at least remind myself that Jackson once truly loved me." Jackson's hands trembled increasingly violently, and large teardrops fell onto the floor one after another, the beads strikingly visible against the dusty surface. Beneath various ticket stubs lay small cards hand-drawn by Chloe, each bearing names that belonged to them exclusively. Coupon for reconciliation, milk tea treat, travel together, fine dining experience. As these memories were brought out one by one, Jackson's quiet tears gradually escalated into stifled sobs. At the very bottom of the box were the small keepsakes of Chloe's daughter that she had carefully collected. The pacifier her daughter used at 2 months old, the teether from when her first teeth appeared at 5 months, the cloth doll her daughter loved since infancy, and the first ID photo taken when she started kindergarten at 3 years old. Every stage of her daughter's growth had been tenderly preserved and meticulously documented by Chloe. Jackson's mind flashed with an image of that soft, milky white little face, one he hadn't dared recollect even once in 3 years. It was his daughter's face. What a sweet girl she was. When she first began speaking at just over a year old, her earliest word was daddy. As she grew older, she would always nestle softly in his arms, cooing daddy, daddy endlessly. Yet his precious daughter had lain buried in Dongshan's cold, filthy soil for 3 whole years. Before she died, was she afraid? All these years, had she missed her daddy? At this thought, Jackson could no longer hold on. His body collapsed heavily onto the floor as he clutched his chest, gasping for breath. It hurt so much, he felt like he was dying from the pain. Why hadn't he searched harder back then? Why had he given up on finding his wife and daughter so easily? If he hadn't given up, maybe Chloe and their daughter wouldn't have died. Maybe they would still be alive and well. The sound of Jackson's fall reached Vivian, who hurriedly followed the noise to the storage room. The moment Vivian came into view, Jackson, lying on the ground, forced an awkward smile. "Vivian, let's get divorced." Vivian's face was full of disbelief, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. What did you say?" But Jackson didn't answer her question, only turning his head to stare blankly at the ceiling, his hollow eyes as if they could no longer see anything. "Take whatever you want. You'll do just fine even after the divorce. As for the child, now 6 months along, you can keep it if you want, or have an abortion if you don't." Vivian threw herself at Jackson, her voice hoarse as she screamed at him in fury. "Jackson, you're my husband, the father of the child in my womb. Do you even realize what you're saying?" Jackson turned his gaze to Vivian. "I'm no longer capable of being your husband." After finishing his words, Jackson covered his eyes with the back of his hand and burst into loud cries, his wail so sorrowful it stirred up dust in the air. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Vivian's eyes. A moment later, she slowly stood up and looked at Jackson, who was weeping bitterly. "You're not thinking straight right now. I'll pretend I never heard what you said today." Vivian turned and walked out of the storage room, not sparing another glance at Jackson still lying on the floor. After Vivian left, the storeroom fell quiet once more. I glanced coldly at Jackson, feeling utterly unmoved by his tears, if anything, disgusted. Yet my daughter in my arms wore a worried expression, though her tone brimmed with undisguised delight. "Mommy, Daddy's crying." "Why is Daddy crying? Does Daddy miss Bella?" "Daddy still loves Bella, doesn't he?" I tightened my grip on my daughter's hand but didn't answer her question. Belated longing and affection hold no meaning whatsoever. His love is something neither my daughter nor I need anymore. If he hadn't betrayed us with Vivian, we wouldn't have met such a tragic end. Does it hurt? Your pain doesn't compare to 1/10,000th of what my daughter and I endured. Jackson, you deserve it. That afternoon, having gathered his emotions, Jackson returned to the police station once more. From the officers, Jackson obtained more detailed investigative information about me and our daughter. When he learned that our disappearance might be connected to Vivian, Jackson's face instantly turned deathly pale. The officer glanced at Jackson. Ms. Vivian is your current wife, isn't she? At this stage, we don't have sufficient evidence. It's just preliminary suspicion. It might not necessarily involve her. However, please inform your wife that during this period, the police may summon her at any time. We hope she will cooperate with our investigation. I stared fixedly at Jackson as he staggered out of the police station and slumped down on the flower bed by the entrance. I don't know how much time passed until night fell, when Jackson finally dialed his secretary's number. Investigate where exactly the missing company funds from 3 years ago went. Get to the bottom of it. There are some photos and an old phone in my office drawer. Take them to have the photos examined and recover the data from the phone. After hanging up, Jackson remained seated, frozen in the same position as during the call, with no one knowing what exactly was going through his mind. But after 9 years together, I know him better than anyone else in this world. He is longing for it, yet also afraid, longing for the truth, yet terrified of it. An hour later, Jackson's phone rang. Jackson didn't speak, and I couldn't hear what the person on the other end said. I don't know how much time passed before I heard Jackson's hoarse voice break the silence. I understand. This time after hanging up, Jackson stood up and walked step by step toward home. The moment he entered, Vivian came to meet him. Jack, where have you been? Why are you coming back so late? I've had dinner ready and waiting for you for ages. I looked past the two figures toward the dining table and saw that it was already laden with a full spread of dishes. I have to say, I really admire Vivian. Despite the scene they made that afternoon, with Jackson even mentioning divorce, she could still calmly prepare a whole table of dishes and wait for him to come home in the evening. No wonder she's Jackson's confidant. Jackson, however, didn't respond to Vivian. Instead, he fixed her with a dark, piercing stare. Suddenly, Jackson reached out and gripped Vivian's chin. It was you who killed Chloe and Bella. 08. Vivian's expression changed, but perhaps thinking Jackson had no evidence, she quickly composed herself again. Jack, what are you saying? Have you been provoked by something? Chloe was my best friend, how could I? But before Vivian could finish speaking, Jackson's hand gripping her chin suddenly tightened, forcing her next words back down her throat. Seeing Jackson's icy gaze and sensing the terrifying chill radiating from him, Vivian's voice trembled slightly. Jack, it's me, Vivian. Jack, look at me properly. It's Vivian. You're scaring me like this. Jackson let out a cold sneer, his eyes chillingly frigid. You're scared? Bold enough to hire assassins, cunning enough to fabricate evidence and frame Chloe afterward. Since when did you know fear? Vivian's face froze for a moment, and she immediately tried to defend herself with excuses. But Jackson didn't give her the chance, violently throwing her to the ground. Stop acting in front of me. I've already had people investigate thoroughly. Those photos you gave me 3 years ago were doctored. The chat records were real. But guess what I did? I had someone recover the data from your old phone. That account's profile picture was indeed Chloe's, but the account itself wasn't Chloe's at all. And as for the money you claimed Chloe embezzled, it all went into your overseas account. Vivian, oh Vivian, have you always been such a vicious and terrifying woman? You and Chloe grew up together in the orphanage. She treated you like a sister. How could you do this to her? Vivian trembled violently as she tried to explain, but Jackson interrupted her once again. This time, Jackson roared it out loud. And Bella? Bella is still so young, she's only 3. What has she done wrong? How could you not even spare Bella? Upon learning that Jackson had already uncovered everything, Vivian was utterly petrified. Moments later, she shook her head in denial while sobbing out her explanation. No, Jack, no, you've got to let me explain. I didn't mean to, really I didn't. I just love you so much. We were so happy together back then. You liked me too, didn't you? But you married Chloe. I was just scared. Afraid you'd leave me one day. Afraid you'd abandon me. Jackson had no interest in hearing her excuses, delivering a brutal kick to her body. Shut up. You didn't mean it? You killed my wife. You killed my daughter. You subjected them to inhuman torture before they died. And now you have the gall to say you didn't mean it. Do you know what the forensic examiner told me? She said Chloe didn't have a single intact bone left in her entire body. Ha 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 ha. Not a single intact bone. Do you know what that means? Vivian, you've really outdone yourself this time. Vivian, are you so desperate to marry me? Are you so eager to replace Chloe? Have you forgotten that everything you have now was given to you by me, Jackson Carter? Now, it's time to pay it back. 09. Epilogue. As soon as Jackson finished speaking, several men dressed in black suits walked in through the door. Vivian covered her stomach and stepped back, her voice brimming with terror. Jackson, what are you doing? I'm carrying a child in my womb, your own flesh and blood. What has he done wrong? Jackson burst into laughter as if he'd just heard the greatest joke. My child died 3 years ago because of you. That thing in your belly is nothing but a bastard. You ask what he's done wrong? When you both rot in hell, go ask him yourself why he had to choose your womb to be born into. Drag her to the basement and rip out that garbage in her belly. I'll make her suffer every ounce of pain that Chloe and Bella endured before they died. As several men in black dragged Vivian away, she finally couldn't contain her fury and screamed at Jackson. Jackson, you bastard, now you pretend to care? Where were you when it mattered? Where were you when you betrayed Chloe? You're nothing but a coward. At least I own up to what I've done. You hypocrite, you're the most disgusting bastard of all. Do you really think I killed Chloe? Let me tell you, you're the one who murdered both her and her daughter. Your betrayal was the fuse that killed them. After what felt like an eternity, the Carter family's basement echoed with the blood-curdling screams of a tormented soul. Amid Vivian's anguished cries, Jackson slid down the wall, collapsing to the floor while murmuring incoherently. Vivian was right. I'm the real murderer. It was me who killed Chloe and Bella. I'm the killer. I'm the killer. I held my trembling daughter tightly in my arms, casting a cold glare at the ashen-faced Jackson before me. Vivian was right. Although she was the murderer, the true architect of all this was the man standing before me. He was the one who couldn't resist temptation, who crossed the line, who gave Vivian hope, who fueled the growing desires in her heart. If only he had been honest back then, had simply told me he'd fallen for someone else, I would have hated and resented him. But at least I could have respected his courage to face the consequences. It was precisely because of his repeated indulgence, his unwillingness to choose between what he wanted, that led to the deaths of my daughter and me. After sitting in a daze for quite some time, Jackson slowly walked into the study and took out a photograph from the bottom drawer of the desk. It was a family portrait of the three of us. In the photo, Jackson held our daughter in his arms, while I linked my arm with his, all of us smiling with joy in our eyes. Jackson's trembling fingers touched the photo, his tears dripping onto the glossy surface. Chloe, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. Will you come back to me? I beg you, give me another chance. Won't you come back? As he spoke, Jackson laughed again. My Chloe, always so stubborn, she'd never forgive me. So I'll go to you instead, alright? We have a deal then. If I come to you, you'll forgive me. With these words, Jackson gently set down the photograph in his hand, picked up the letter opener from the desk, and drove it fiercely into his throat. In an instant, blood spurted violently. I covered my daughter's eyes, not wanting her to witness this scene. I watched Jackson quietly until his breath completely ceased. Until his life fully faded, Jackson's gaze remained fixed on that family portrait. The moment Jackson stopped breathing, a large glowing ring appeared on the balcony. As the light dissipated, a pristine white staircase materialized before me and my daughter. I held my daughter's hand and slowly walked toward the heavenly staircase. Before leaving, I turned to take one last glance at Jackson. Jackson, you'll never find me, because my daughter and I are going to heaven. And you and Vivian deserve nothing but hell. The end.